Afternoon, folks. Old Buster coming to you again with a story. This starts it'll probably be in parts. The name of this story is The Trip. Now, this starts off with how the boys get into everything they're getting into, business-wise and family-wise and everything else. And I'm going to tell you some of it's true and some of it's not. It's just it's a story. But the boys have to go through this trip before they can find out exactly where they're going with their life and so forth. And then we've got 2 or 3 other stories we're going to be reading to you that are shorter than this story. And it gets on back to, like I say, to the story called The Vacation. And that starts off the rest of their life after they get out of high school. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope you can follow me through this. Now, I've never read one this long, so we may break it up in parts. And if I don't, you can stop the doggone video and then you can start her back up again. But we'll just see where we go. I got me a little water to sip on through here. Like I told you folks before, I'm not a professional whatsoever. I'm just reading this story to you, what I wrote. The one thing I want to remind y'all of, that if you will write me at busterandtheboys@yahoo.com, I'll be more than happy to send you the videos, the recordings. I'll send you all of the original written scripts with pictures and all the information, just like this one on the trip. All these places these boys are going to go to has pictures with it of the things they saw and information about it and whatnot. And I kind of enjoyed that. And Cousin Jesse, he's the one that got me to do this. So we will have a little later on, there's going to be some things in there on all the cast of characters. We'll get that a little bit later on, after the vacation one, like I told you. And something called Daryl's Ditties, because Jesse's name is Jesse Daryl. And it's how this all started with all these doggone emails and whatnot. Him not answering the phone, kind of like Lulu. They get lost somewhere and don't hear that phone. Well, anyway, we're going to start this off. This is the old trip. So, here we go. The Trip. Can't dance, too wet to plow, the mule's pregnant. Well, now, don't that beat all? Reckon that about says it all when it comes to singing and drawing pictures or roller skating, don't it? Well, Buster can do a lot of things, but those ain't them. Playing those musical instruments another. He can't do that neither. But he does them out of a writing. Just come natural to the boy. Well, Walter don't like no reading, and neither does Hired, but Jesse does. Well, Buster and Jesse does all the writing when it comes to it for the fellers. Well, Walter is awful good at ciphering and just plain figuring. Well, Hired likes things that give him a run for his and money, so no job is too tough for him. Fact is, he likes the ones that nobody else wants to take. Now, Buster's boys always come along with him. For sure, that's goes without saying. Them boys all in there just like peas in a pod. When they was youngins, and seemed like Walter and Jesse was the littlest of the bunch, whilst Hired was in the middle and Buster was the biggest by far. Now, Walter sprung up like a weed after that when he done got out of high school, but that's a little bit later on. He was a little feller, about 120 pound and 5'5" or 5'6", somewhere in there. And Jesse was a mite smaller than that, but both them boys could and would scrap. Fight a circle saw. Walter was a mite more to get in on the mix than Jesse, but when you got old Jesse Daryl all riled up, he'd make you think you was a grabbing a bobcat. Getting your eyes like a coon, the boy would. Now, Jesse's ma was kind of worried about him and all, so she up and carried him off to the doctor. That's old Doc Harris. Well, when the boy got on in there, he done holler out, "She won't feed me." Well, now, if that didn't take his boss by surprise, nothing else did. Of course, Doc Harris knowed Jesse's folks, and that his and ma was one fine cook, and by the looks of his and 2 sisters, they had plenty of victuals. And Mr. McBrayer as well. Mac could eat his fill, too. Well, Jesse didn't fancy certain things to eat, and sure enough, it ain't changed to this day. Now, Jesse don't like nothing that crunches again his teeth, he says. And his ma says that's a fact. And he sure enough don't eat no corn or nothing slappy neither. But Buster'd eat Jesse so his plate would be clean when it was all over. Lord of mercy if them boys ain't something, and that Buster had a holler leg. And he didn't like no steak or roast beef neither, so Buster'd eat both of theirs. Oh, doggone, that Buster, he'd even been to that dadgum restaurant there in Amarillo, Texas. They have that 72-ounce steak. He said, I can eat it, but I ain't going to get on that stage and sit up there and let people look at me. And some of that stuff you got, I don't really like to eat, so just bring on the steak, though. I'll eat it. They said, well, then it's going to cost you $50. Buster said, well, bring it on. Did I tell you to worry about the money? The boy can eat it now. I ain't lying. Anyway, y'all get me to talking about other things other than reading this story, getting me tickled thinking about all of it. That time before they ate that 72-ounce one, he ate a 46 one over at a place called Montana Mike's for dinner. Boy could eat. Anyway, Hired and Walter ain't nearly as picky about victuals, but Buster has a little quirksome nature too, you know. Well, Jesse dearly loved hamburgers though, and he eat them for breakfast even. And don't even take Jesse to no car wash, I tell you. He gets plumb fractious about them things. Something about him get him all crazy. Well, anyhow, don't give that boy no liver nor beef, 'cause he'll gag like a gopher. Buster just can't stand them things. Says them beets taste like dirt, and there just ain't no describing liver. Buster's real partial to sweets, though, and especially pie. Sweet tater pie, fried peach pies, pecan pie, coconut pie is his most favorite. Well, Buster's ma always made him a pineapple upside-down cake when he had a birthday when he was a young'un, and figured that was just about every week when he was little. He could eat that whole cake, one every week. Ain't you ever heard something like that? Now, old Walter would even eat raw onions right out the garden, and he got hired to eat one 'cause he was sick and said it would cure old Hired. Well, on the way back to Hired, house, Hired got sicker than a dog, and I do mean commode hugging sick. Well, he said he'd get him back for that. Well, now Hired didn't mean no harm, but Walter didn't mean no harm, but Hired, he figured he did. Lord, that boy's always a trickster. Well, Hired figured Walter done tricked him again, but he didn't that time. He was just trying to help, but it didn't do nothing but clean Hired out. Well, Hired don't eat no onion no more neither. Don't rightly know how I got to telling on the boys, but it goes to show you something about them, though. All them boys was a one-woman man, too, and was just raised right about them sort of things. Now, Walter's Uncle Jeff took a shine to him, and that was awful good, 'cause it seemed Uncle Jeff was kind of vexed at times, you know. He was a government man or army or something, and sure enough would tell Walter some exciting things that he would tell the boys. Well, Jesse's grandpa was a good one too, like Buster's. They would carry them boys with them everywhere to place. Now, Hired rode motorcycles and raced all the time. Of course, Buster done some of that too. Got to be right good at it, and was going to be professional till he wrecked up and busted out his front teeth and broke a pile of his bones to boot. Well, he laid up for a spell and decided that was enough of that for him, except just for fun. But that boy can ride like the wind, do things on one of them motorcycles you'd never believe. Now, old Walter been throwed a few times himself. Busted up some ribs and knocked his shoulder out of socket. Oh, boy. Buster was always beat up a tussling or working or playing football or some kind of something or other. Jesse was in good shape till he done got the diabetes. Buster got the fatness, Walter got the gout, Hired got some hurts too, and I guess they come by it honest as they was into something all the time. Of course, this is all when they got older. One thing about it though, their coal piles weren't very big when it come to work. They tackle anything. Their paws had to make them quit at night. They just wouldn't stop till their work was done. It didn't make no never mind what kind of job they would put on. They'd get her done. All them boys rode horses and plowed with mules, Walter done it every day and has all his in life, but not like his and big brother Ike. Like I told you before, Walter don't ride nothing but a gray. Well, Hired Buster dearly loves speed. Walter liked to gom around, and so did Jesse. You can bet your bottom dollar Hired Buster was a leading the pack, and the race was on to see who got there first. Well, generally it's Hired, I hate to tell the truth. Don't know if y'all ever been around a dryer before. Buster's grandpa Gus had one where they took all their rice and soybeans and some of the other farmers' crop too. When it come a rain, the water would drain to the elevator leg and stand there. Well, somebody had to climb on down to the bottom and dip it out and clean out all the mess it made. Stink to high heaven, I tell you. There'd be all manner of dead critters in there, and chickens and rats and dogs and millions of skippers and snakes sometimes. You just had to hunker on down and reach up in there and get to pulling it all out. Cause them old beans or that rice, well, they'd spoil up in there, and especially when it got hot. When Buster got home after he done the job, his and Grandma would scrub him with vinegar and lemon juice to get rid of the smell. But it had to be done. Walter had to custom cut with his and Pa, and he learned the ropes with the hobos like I said before. Met all kinds of fellers down on their luck and worked all kinds of that. They all had something to teach him, you know. Walter told the boys what all they told him. Well, Hired went to working with his pa in the dirt business. Jesse, and I'm spilling the beans here, went to a lawyer in school, but he sure enough done his in part when he was growing up. Just doing chores to make a living is enough said. I'm finally getting to the point about telling about the trip them boys done took. Just remember, when the boys set their minds to something, they can be mule stubborn now. But Jesse takes a cake to being set in his and ways, I tell you. Now that he ain't a considering type feller, but I don't want to say that too much, cause he does, you know. But it takes right smarter doings to change his mind. That's for sure. You just gotta prove up, you know. As the old saying goes, you can tell a tiger by his stripes. Well, Buster's there right behind him, sitting then Walter. Hired just hangs back and don't say much. Well, Jesse don't say much neither, but when he does, you better listen. All right, I'm a-getting there, but it just takes a bit of getting all this straight. Well, it all started on a notion. Don't rightly know whose idea it was, but it come about and they took on off. Well, y'all got to forgive me about this reading here, because these old eyes where I had that surgery by old Doc Harrison, they still getting well, and I'm a-batting them there and have to have a little water every once in a while, so if y'all will forgive me about that. Like I said, this ain't no professional picture show where you go to downtown paying $10, $20. It's just old Buster telling you how things are, and these old stories we're writing. All right, they done took off on the trip now. West, east? Well, first off, they had their malls pack them up some good eating victuals for the road. They was a-driving Buster's Ford and had her packed to the brim. The boys done saved up some of their wages they made on the side and had a pretty fair amount of hard cash. And if you remember, some of the winnings of Buster's poker playing, plus Walter's wheeling and dealing and some hogs he had, and to bring back the others of some of the money they won a-racing and carrying on with the horses. Right off the bat, they got turned around and headed east and ended up in Tennessee. They decided they was going west, but they ended up east. Don't know how that happens, but they've been doing it all this whole trip. Well, Buster and Jesse had kin people from thereabouts in Kentucky as well, so they just figured that was just as good a place as any to light for a spell. They didn't have to be anywhere at any certain time or any certain place. Now, the Pews had a knack for making the purest blue moon you ever put a lip lock on. That liquor went down as smooth as silk, but had the kick of a mule when it hit the bottom. Well, Ish, that's Buster's first cousin, Cecil, was in from racing up in Charlotte, and he said he was going to show the boys around a bit. Well, the boys got there on a Saturday night, and Ish said he knowed the place to go. there was a gospel singing over to the Hooper place in their barn they had fixed up, and they had 3 gals, pretty as a picture and tall enough to dance with. The Hooper gals could sure enough sing and had a passel of their hill girlfriends to the meeting that night. Ish done introduced the boys to all and to those gals, and they sure took a shine to the boys now. There tweren't no dancing right off, but plenty of hand clapping and foot stomping whilst the Hooper gals and their family played music and sang. Then some of the other folks round about sang too. Well, the singing and a little preaching and praying was over about then anyway, and then they was just starting up a shindig. The old fiddle and banjo began to ring around all that old barn, and I tell you, it was something sight to hear. And then a guitar jumped on in there too. There was an old piano off to the side, and a feller with red spinders was a-pounding them ivories and joined right in. Boy, howdy, did that party take off then. And the boy sure enough was a-grinning and ready for the dance. Well, Ish done whispered kind of soft-like to the boys to meet him out back. Well, when they met up with Ish, he had a couple of the local boys that was friends of his out there, and they all shook hands and talked a bit, and then one of the boys brung out a jug. Well, Ish told the boys to take a little swallow of that, and they was in for a treat. Now, Ish didn't figure the boys knowed much about white lightning and was a-waiting to see their eyeballs roll back like window shades. Didn't happen with the boys, though. They could write a book on homebrew and liquor, and it was dearly loved and cherished by Buster more than any of them. That boy growed up drinking out of a bottle before he could even toddle. Anyhow, they all got to feeling their oats, 'cause there just wasn't no way not to get a buzz with that kind of liquor. A little hot, they say. Now, Jesse done took up dancing at the schoolhouse, and boy, was he a-cutting the rug with one of them Hooper gals. He had to have a little on him there. That white lightning, that old blue moon, or he wouldn't have been out there doing that. The middle one, I think it was, the middle Hooper gal. She stood a full head and shoulders taller than Jesse, leastwise a foot or so. Quite a pair, I'd say. She was the biggest of the bunch, and here Jesse was the littlest of the boys. She just would not turn Jesse loose for nothing at all night long. Well, now, Walter was a pretty dang good at the Texas two-step himself and was not to be outdone by nobody. One of them other Hooper gals sashayed up to Walter and told him he was hers, and away they went off a-strutting their stuff. Well, Hart weren't no dancer, but he just had the look with them cheery red cheeks and all, them little dimples there. As the night wore on, everybody was a-having a high old time. But when it come time to pack up and head on for the house, that's when it all began to get real exciting. Well, all the folks done left, and Ish went to getting his chivvy. The boys was a-saying their goodbyes and a-thanking Pa and Ma Hooper for their hospitality and a good time had by all. Well, that's when Pa Hooper told the boys to sit and visit for a spell. He done told the boys that since his and gals took a liking and a shine to him, that he was a-readying for a marrying come morning. Woo, now that made the boys about swallow their tongue, I'm a-telling you. Buster says to Pa Hooper, "What you mean to marry up with your gals?" Well, Pa Hooper says since all that sparking last night and the hugging and the kissing and goings on, he said the boys just had to make it right. He says since he was a preacher, he would marry up the whole bunch at one time. Woo! You gotta know that big un had a hold of little Jesse wasn't about to turn him loose. And that little un latched on to Walter till his circulation was plumb cut off his arm. Oh, no. Now the oldest one of them Hooper gals hog-tied hired with her night shawl all wrapped around them both, and she weren't about to let him go neither. Well, Ma Hooper said she'd go in and make up their marrying beds, and then after the festivities and all the chivalry would commence. Now, Buster wasn't in on the marrying up since he done had this all figured out and told them all he was afflicted like and all. Oh, me, folks. So he eases on out and catches Ish by the outhouse and told him what was going on. Well, Ish said, "Lordy mercy, cuz, I never figured this." But he knowed that for years them gals were looking for husbands. Well, Ish and Buster made up a plan real quick like, And Buster told Ish he knowed just how to get the boys' attention and look further to fetch 'em. Well, Buster knowed they'd come a-running as soon as they got free of the gals. Well, Ish took that jug and poured it all around the outhouse and told Buster to get the boys when he cranked up the chivvy and come to the south side of the barn. There was an old logging road over there that he used to run shine on to get away from the police. He'd cut back over the mountain and hit the highway with tires a-burning, and nobody would catch him after that for sure. Well, Buster and the boys had a call they heard on a Tarzan picture show, and Buster was the only one of the bunch that could imitate it perfect-like. It was Buster's way of gathering them in when something was afoot. Lord of mercy. Ish lit a chunk and set that shine to burning, and such a ruckus you never seed the likes of started up. Ma Hooper thought the outhouse was a-burning and began to screaming and a-hollering and running around like a chicken with their head cut off. Now, Pa Hooper told the gals and the boys to fetch water at the well and help put out the fire. About that time, Buster let out his and Tarzan call. Oh! That's really a peacock on that Tarzan show. And that call, and the boys let out running towards Buster. I know that probably scared you plumb to death being doing that. Well, Ish rounded the corner on two wheels in a cloud of dust and hollered to get in, boys. Well, Buster had the doors and windows open and the boys piled on in. Well, Jesse jumped in head first in through the window and Buster pulled him on in. Walter dove in the front seat with Hired on top of him. The race was on, I tell you. About that time they all heard a cussing and a shotgun blast over the car. Well, Ish give her the gas, and down the road they went lickety-split. Ish said there wasn't to be no harm, 'cause the fire was just a ring around the outhouse and wouldn't burn nothing down at all. Ish says, boys, I told you all would have a high old time tonight, and sure enough they did. Have a little pull on this old jug of Grandma Pew's, one for the road, you might say. Well, after a spell, things settled down a bit, and the boys said they ain't never seen the like before this evening. What a story. Closer they'd ever wanted to get to the shotgun wedding, they said. Ish was just a-laughing and told them they needed to hear a story or two from Buster. He done had his share of mountain romance, too, the last time he come to visit when he took Buster to the Red Dog Saloon. Well, all the boys got on back to the house, and Buster's Aunt Mamie, Ish's ma, fixed up a mighty fine breakfast. And Buster asked her if he could have some of her cornbread and biscuits and gravy for the road. She asked the boys if they was headed on out, and they all said yes as soon as they was done eating. She fixed them up a right smart of groceries to take with them, and they said their goodbyes to her and Uncle Roscoe and took off heading north. Well, they saw the boys off just a-laughing and a-waving and told Buster to get on back soon. Well, Walter, Jesse, and Hired told Buster it was the dangdest time to be had ever, but sure wasn't looking for another like that soon. All the boys hollered, "Hey there north, Buster. Hey there on north." And off they went, just as snowflakes the size of a 2-bit piece took to a falling. Well, northeast. Uh-oh. Seeing how they got such an early start and all, the boys figured they'd make a little detour over towards Buster and Jesse's folks' place where they first settled at Mount Sterling, Kentucky. Come to find out that Buster and Jesse had to be cousins. In them days, there just wasn't no way to get around except in just horses, buggies, and walking. Back in the hills, there weren't much of a place to go excepting right there, and folks just had to make do. So finding a husband or a wife had to be done right there with the folks at hand. So I reckon as fate had it, the McBrayers and the Tiptons was just bound to marry up in each other's family somehow or another. Now in them days, both sets of families was pretty well thought of, you know. The Tiptons had a lawyer or two in the family, as well as 3 preachers and a senator down at Frankfort. Now the McBrayers had a distillery that made Old McBrayer whiskey. Some of the finest Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey there was, and it was even sent plumb over to the England and other parts of the world. Now that ain't the England where the boys are from down in that part of the world, but that's the England across the pond. Old Hugh Forbes founded the place way back in 1792. Now he was a Scottish feller, kind of like, Jesse's people. And that's how them McBrayers come to be there. They come from Scotland too and knowed the Forbes clan right well. Thing is, the Forbes people didn't stay long and died out young. The Tiptons had been there a sight longer since the 1600s. Anyhow, Buster and Jesse had folks that was kin by marriage, and they was plumb tickled about it. Between the tobacco and the larping good whiskey, folks did right well in them parts, and there was jobs and hard cash to spend. Some folks took to mining, and Buster's people worked the coal mines thereabouts too. The boys done pulled into a station there and was filling their tank, looking for a place to stay the night, when Jesse and Walter sidled up to an old gentleman whittling on a piece of hickory. Well, hickory sure wouldn't be my first choice of wood to whittle on, being it's a hard and all. But that old feller sure enough was making chips fly. Must have had the sharpest dang knife in the county to do that, Anyway, Walter could get a rock to talk to him, and he was just a-chatting away when all of a sudden he done hollered over to the rest of the boys to come on over. He said, "You just gotta listen to what this feller has to say." Well, that old man said he knowed both Jesse and Buster's people and said they had some kin about a mile on down the road. And he was right proud to meet the boys and commenced to tie 'em up to the folks he knowed all his life. They visited for quite a spell and told all about their ma and pa and grandma and grandpa and everybody they could think of as far as back as they each knowed. Sure enough, the old man said, that old maid and that grandniece of hers was direct kin to the boys. Said they ought to go on up for a visit and just say howdy if nothing else. Well, the boys said, well, what the heck, and drove on up through the turnoff at the lane to the house. Now, it weren't no house, I tell you. It was a mansion. It was on the backside of the old distillery for that old McBrayer whiskey of Jesse's people. Was a bit run down, but not by much. Just needed a little TLC and a man's hand and things. Well, Jesse done jumped out of that Ford and made a beeline to the door. He knocked on the door with a big old door knocker and tugged a mite on the pull rope for the door chime. And after a bit, a real purty gal answered the door. She was as purty as a July goldenrod, and Walters and Hired's eyeballs like to have popped plumb out of their sockets and rolled back like them window shades. She asked Jesse if she could help them, and Jesse stated their business about visiting some kin of theirs. She said, "I declare Aunt Judith and I didn't know any of our relations that was still living. Would y'all like to come in and speak to her?" Well, it sure didn't take long for an answer for them boys, I tell you. All of them piped up at once and told her they'd be right proud and appreciative to speak to her Aunt Judith. Well, that gal invited them all into the parlor and asked them to wait till she announced them to Aunt Judith, who was a-reading in the library. She said she was just a-finishing up in her daily Bible study and be right back. Well, just a few minutes later, the gal come back and fetched the boys and introduced her aunt and asked if each of the boys would introduce themselves to her. Well, there was Jesse McBrayer, and there was Buster, and his given name is Russell Jr. Tipton, and then Walter Ollinger and Hired Holmes. Now this was a real life Southern lady now, folks, I tell you. Made the boys put their collar on real straight and be real respectful like to this lady. So, again, Jesse is Jesse Darrell McBrayer, and Buster is Gail Russell Tipton Jr., and his dad is Russell. And then there's Walter Dwayne Ollinger, and then, oh lordy, Douglas Hired Holmes. That's their real names. And they don't mind me telling you that. And them boys is all just thicker than thieves, The Balls was real fine women, but just didn't have the schooling at a highfalutin college like this lady did. That gal was just like her too, Come to find out, her name was Elizabeth Jane Barrett. Now, it don't mean that the boys and Malls wasn't smart, and they would work like a Turk, but they just didn't have no opportunity for schooling. Anyway, but now get this. Aunt Judith was Judith Ann Tipton McBrayer. Now don't that skin a cat. Don't that beat all. The boys like to have dropped their eye teeth over that one. Now, Aunt Judith had a sister named Julie, and her daughter Mary married up with a Barrett boy and come to have Elizabeth Jane, their onlyest child. They done passed while on a trip to the Orient. Some kind of bug from some kind of mussel shell or whatnot in the water done took them. Well, Aunt Judith asked the boys if they wanted a bite to eat, and you know them boys could eat a horse at any time, day or night. Well, Miss Elizabeth Jane went on out and told some kitchen help to fix up some eats for the boys. Well, those women folks that was helping them out had been with their family for years and years and was like family themselves. Anyhow, there was a meal fitting for a king. Them boys eat till they about pop. Well, when the meal was done, Aunt Judith had them all to retire to the parlor and offered up some after-dinner drinks. Lo and behold, it was old McBrayer whiskey. You knowed it'd been gone long time since the distillery been shut down for all them years. But sure enough, there it was. Finest sipping whiskey to ever pass them boys' lips, that's for sure. Well, Aunt Judith started recollecting on how they was kin and was all a wonder about Jessie and Buster. She didn't know they was any of her kins left excepting Miss Elizabeth Jane. Well, Hired and Walter was underfoot with that gal every second they was there at the house, always asking if they could help or carry something or fix something. Well, every time she'd smile, they'd just pert in their swoon, I'm telling you. Even got to tussling a bit when she needed firewood chopped and carried to the stove in the kitchen. Just trying to outdo the other, trying to impress Miss Elizabeth Jane for her favor. Well, here's how it was. Aunt Alice was a Tipton and a McBrayer. Her ma was a Tipton for sure, and she married up with a McBrayer. They come from the Stamper side. Well, Judith done had a great Uncle Archie, but he was supposed to have been killed on a riverboat gambling, but it seems that just ain't so. He probably got shot up and was nursed by that southern gal down in New Orleans till he was better. They was some pretty rough fellers in that day, and Archie didn't want no harm to come to his family, so he just stayed down there for a spell and healed up. Married up that Cajun French gal he put so much stock in and had 3 young'uns. They moved up to Alaska when he was hunting gold and back down Missouri way for a land grant down there, and finally ended up in Mississippi just outside of Memphis in the cotton trade. That had a lot of freight to be hauled, and he got into that and made a fortune. Now his 2 sons and a girl went on to marry up, and they settled in Arkansas and Alabama. Well, Jesse McBrayer had a boy Jesse, and he had our Jesse Durrell. The girl Sarah married up with Russell, Buster's pa, and the other boy James died in the big war over in France. Maybe y'all getting all this. There's a lot to talk about, I'm here to tell you. Now that they figured out how it all come about, they was a crying and a hugging and was as happy as a pig in the sunshine to have found each other. The boys stayed on for a fortnight and helped around the place and made all manner of repairs. One day Aunt Judith called Jesse and Buster into the library for a chat. Well, Miss Elizabeth Jane was there too. She told them she wanted to discuss something with them. Now, you know Aunt Judith and the boys had done called home to the folks, and the folks was all agog about what they done found out about Aunt Judith and Elizabeth Jane. Well, anyway, Aunt Judith said she still made old McBrayer whiskey from the original recipe, and the old distillery was still in working order. She owned all the rights and the land around it, and the house and all the belongings too. She has some cash, but not so much, and some stock certificates her daddy done left her. Seems like he knowed the feller that invented things, and he helped a bit to get it all started, and the feller give him 20% of the stock. The company was now called SAB, South African Breweries. It come out of Castle Breweries. Aunt Judith said she was getting on up in years and she wanted Elizabeth Jane, Jessie, and Buster to have it all. She then took them all out to the distillery and opened up the doors to reveal the equipment and kettles and bottling machines. They were dusty and unused, but she continued on to a secret panel that led to a limestone cave under the foundation. There was barrels of Old McBrayer just for the asking. What a sight to see. Now that whiskey would cost you some money. Aunt Judith had all of them sit down and she poured them all a little jigger full and toasted her family that was now all together. Aunt Judith then began to tell them how it was to be. Told Jessie to look into them stock certificates and see what they was worth and to check on what to do with investing or cashing in the proceeds, but not to sell more than 40% of them. Buster was to look into cranking the distillery up, and Elizabeth Jane was to look after the business side of the home place. They all agreed to take care of each other, and the women that had been with the family for so many years and would always keep things the way they was unless they all agreed to do something different. Well, Jessie and Buster was a popping buttons right about then. They asked about their folks back home. She said they could do as they pleased with their part, but it was for the young'uns of the bunch to carry on the names of McBrayer and Tipton and make both families proud. Aunt Judith said she would consider it an honor if Jessie's ma and his sisters could come for a visit with Buster's grandpa Gus and grandma. Now, all of Buster's people had all passed, and his and ma's folks was all that was left. Now, the boys had sense enough to know they couldn't do all this by themselves, so they would just leave well enough alone till all was in place like it ought to be. They'd take just enough to set things right with the old McBrayer distillery and care for body and soul. Elizabeth Jane said she would stay for a spell with Aunt Judith, and then she wanted to go back to Europe to finish up some studies she'd been taking. She knowed this feller over there that was an awful fine feller and figured on seeing where that was a-going. That like to broke Walter and Howard's hearts, I tell you, when Jessie told them that. Them three done made up a pact to care for Aunt Judith till she passed and would be coming around so much that you couldn't throw the dishwater out the back door without hitting them in the hay. Well, Buster got to wondering how Aunt Judith's pa even met up with that feller that give him the stock. Well, his name, as she remembered, was Frederick Meade, and was just stopping over on his way back home to England to raise some money for a new brewery. Well, they got to talking, and her pa Samuel give old Fred $500 in gold pieces to get her started. Heck of a lot of money back then, and in gold too. Turned out to be a right good investment, as they might say, and as they see. Buster and Jessie got Walter and Howard, told them all about the doings going on. They said they wanted to be in on it with them, and they all had a future bright and pure if they just played their cards right. Well, the boys was happy as a pig in flop, and with a few bottles of Aunt Judith's Old McBrayer whiskey, they was in hog heaven. Well, after Sunday meeting at the First Christian Church on the place, they all ate a fine meal and told the ladies they was off in the morning. Aunt Judith and Elizabeth Jane teared up some, but the boys all said they'd come back through after their trip and stay a spell while Elizabeth Jane went on back to Europe for a visit. Well, you'd think that was it for surprises, but it sure wasn't. Howard and Walter got 'em one. Howard was chasing a bull snake down at the distillery when it run under a pile of rocks. Well, Howard couldn't get to it, so he went on the inside of the building and was looking for a pry bar or something to move them rocks. He done found this old horseshoe on the wall holding a tater hoe. When he went to get that there tater hoe, he pulled down on that there horseshoe, and danged if it didn't turn halfways and a trapdoor popped open. Well, in the meantime, Walter was off riding a gray he found out in the back pasture. He was a darn good horse whisperer, and he done took some sugar cubes from the house, an apple off a tree in the yard, and walked up to that horse real quiet-like and had him eating out of his hand in no time. Well, no sooner than he began to talking to that horse, he up and jumped a straddle of him and was a riding bareback a racing the wind. He was riding down by the creek when he heard the awfulest commotion. He looked up and guess what he done seed? Hired come a-flying through the air and landed in the water right there at the horse's feet. The gray reared up and throwed Walter right smack dab in the middle of the creek besides Hired. Well, old Hired come up a spitting and a spewing, but the water tweren't that deep. Only it's about 5 foot or so. When that trap door popped open, old Hired dropped down a pipe and ended up at the creek. And that water's cold too now. It was an old escape tunnel to the outside if Indians and scoundrels come about with scare skullduggery. Wet and grinning from ear to ear, them two boys was splitting their sides a laughing. Wetter than a frog hair they was, and was just plain amazed at all the doings they was a-seeing on this here trip. Well, them two up and hiked on back to the house and dried off and told their story to everybody. Well, Aunt Judith didn't know nothing about that there trapdoor, but it got a laugh out of Hired and Walter that had her dabbing her eyes with her hanky. Well, next morning the boys said their goodbyes, and after all the hugs they hated on out again. They kind of went northeast, and now they was going to hate on back towards the west. Northwest, that is. Well, folks, we're getting close to about halfway through, and I'm not wondering if I don't need to stop here and let y'all have a little break, and I'm going to get a little sip of water, and then we can crank her back up. Don't take long, does it? All right. West, or north. That old Ford Buster's had a mind of its own because the direction they had was to be going seemed to get turned around every which way. Supposed to go west, now they're going north. Started west and ended up going east, headed north and went northeast, but now they was finally going straight north. Going to see some snow for sure. Them boys never did see snow that was piled high, you know. They drove for a piece for the next couple of days and finally come to a stopping point at the Canadian border and then turned back towards the west. Well, they took turns of driving, but Walter drove too slow, so Buster took over the driving chores again and had to open her up a bit between him and Hired. Now Jesse had to stop and gum around a bit, and every little thing and every hole in the wall, like Davy Crockett's Tavern, all them little towns that sported some kind of museum. Him and Walter, they'd stay all day if you let them. The boys joined up in parades and rubber duck races on the river and a pie eating contest at a county fair. Well, Walter had to show his hand at riding and roping at a little rodeo somebody put on outside of a place in Wyoming. Well, Hired done brung his motorcycle with him and raced at the Pike Peak mountain track. Come in second there, too. Well, after making their way, having a ball doing it, they come the back way into the border of Idaho. That old Ford was a good one and had four-wheel drive and not nary a ball tire. Jesse and Hired was a gawking at something or another when they found a back road near the border. Reckon it was less than 20 miles from Canada by that time. Well, them two boys just had to take that trail, and so Buster turned up the trail there and made his way as far as he could, you know. So far, in fact, he couldn't turn around. Well, the boys got out and started exploring a bit before dark. As I said, they had plenty of victuals and camping gear with them, and plus a shotgun and their rifles. Right at dusk, Dang Diffin Hired didn't go chasing some critter he said he ain't never seen before and come to a rock wall in the side of the mountain there. That Hired them critters, you know, he's something else. Had away with him. Well, whatever that critter was, he done run right on into that mountain. Hired done hollered for the boys to come see if they could help him figure out how that critter done that. Well, they got to looking and it come on to dark, and Walter and Jesse found a crack in the face of the mountain that was covered up by some bushes. Well, all of them got to pulling back the brush and found it to be movable like. A door of some kind that led into the mountain itself is what it was. even though there was a full moon and bright starlight on a clear night, they decided to wait for morning to do more investigating. Well, they cooked up some beans and taters and a slab of bacon and bologna on the side for supper and made up their bed in a big tent they brung with them. Whilst they was sitting around the campfire, Walter asked Buster to tell him the story old Ish was referring to when Buster went up there to visit him. Buster said it was the dangest time for sure. He said he heard tell of some of the rough places up in them hills and didn't figure he ever wanted to go there, and told Ish so. Well, Ish told Buster they wasn't going to go to no place like that, but he was taking him out that night for a mite of fun and pure D licking good white lightning and maybe a few pretty gals. Sounded good, said Buster. Where we headed to, Ish? Well, I reckon we can run out to a club across the mountain. There's a gal over there I want to see. Okay, said Buster. What's the name of the place? The Pink Puppy. The Pink Puppy. Well, you're going to have some fun there for sure, Buster. Well, sir, as they was driving over to the place, Buster seen something alongside the road, and Buster hollered for Ish to back on up so he could see what it was. Well, it was a feller trying to get up the ditch bank. Well, when Buster and Ish got to where they could get on out where the feller was, he up and clumb up out of that ditch. Well, Buster asked the feller if he was all right and could he help him. The feller was beating his in chest with both hands and crossed his arms like he was swatting flies. It's the truth, folks. I know you don't think so. Well, Buster asked the feller what was the matter with his himself, and he said nothing. He was lost and just trying to find his himself. Oh me, now if that didn't take the cake, said Buster to Ish, that feller was drunker than a skunk, I tell you. Well, the feller just ambled on off down the road and they drove on down to this club. Well, when they got there, Buster hollered, "Oh no, this here's the Red Dog Saloon. It's sure enough the roughest place in the county. Might even be in the state. We ain't a-going in there, are we?" He said, "Now don't fret none now, cuz he knowed everybody there. As long as they knowed he was with him, it'd be all right." Well, as they was getting out the car, a feller come a-flying out the door and landed on the hood of a car parked out there. It was about 4 to 5 foot to the top of the porch, and the feller took screen door and all when he come flying over him. Lord, I remember that. Ish grabbed Buster's arm, pulled him up the steps and to the club. Well, everybody in the club turned around and looked at him when they walked in. Ish told them all that this here is my very own first cousin from Arkansas. And he is meaner than me and Powell, that's his brother, another first cousin, put together, so you better leave him be. And then they went on back to what they was a-doing. Well, Ish had Buster to sit on down at a table and said he'd be right on back and headed to the bar. Ish was back before Buster knowed it with a couple of drinks. Then said, "Enjoy yourself, I got some things to tend to." Well, Buster was sitting there enjoying his drink when a woman sat on down beside him. She told him to buy her a drink, and Buster was being friendly, said he didn't mind that at all, but he didn't want no trouble. She said there wouldn't be none. Buster went up to the bar and asked for a bourbon and a Coke. "Ain't none," said the bartender. "Bourbon and a 7-Up." "Nope. Bourbon and branch." "Just boon. You furnish your own fixings." "I ain't got none," says Buster. The bartender pointed to a Coke machine in the corner. Buster got the drinks and brung them on back to the table. Him and the gal was a-talking when this feller come up and was a-giving her what for. The feller looked at Buster a-fuming, and Buster said he didn't want no trouble. The gal told the feller then to get on out of there. Well, he left all deliberated like. Buster asked the gal just who was that. She said that was a boyfriend. Buster told her he just didn't want no trouble. She said there wouldn't be. Well, they had another drink, and then another feller just come, just all upset. He come up. He started in on the gal, and she set him to sale. Buster asked her again who was that. She said that's her ex-husband. Buster told her again he didn't want no trouble, and she said it'd be okay. Well, after a bit and about 2 more drinks, this feller come up a breathing fire and just a getting on that gal and turned on to Buster. Buster told the feller, said, listen here, that he just sit down a waiting on his cousin, and the gal plopped down beside him and asked him for a drink. So we got her one. Well, the feller turned on the gal and they began to fussing and a cussing something terrible like. Finally, the gal run him off, him just a spitting fire. Buster asked the gal just who in the dickens was that. She said that was her husband. Well, that done it for Buster. He got up from there and lit his shuck to find Ish. He done found him over by the far tables with the gal. About that time, all manner of hell done was started to breaking loose. Reckon all them fellers was fighting mad over that gal and went to throwing bottles and cans at each other and everybody else too. Even the jukebox was a target. Reckon that's why it was all covered up in chicken water. Buster got to Ish and got out of there whilst the getting was good. Well, when they hit the highway, the police was waiting and lit out after. Well, Ish knowed every trick in the book, every road too. Them police never did catch him. Well, that sure enough was enough excitement for one night, said Buster to Ish. Ish says to Buster, why don't we run into Knoxville and see some gals I know? Buster told him he ain't a-going to go. He just didn't have on his fighting clothes. He didn't need no more surprises. There you have it, boys. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Won't get a little drink of water here, folks. I tell you, them boys have been on some adventures. Alrighty. Morning come early, so they turned in for the night. Well, it just wasn't due for Hired not to know what was in that hole in that mountain. So he took up his and kerosene lantern and went on into the hole to take a peek. His curiosity just got the better of him. Well, after a bit, old Hired ain't come back to bed, and Buster had to find the bushes for some relief, and there was no Hired to be found. He woke up Walter and Jesse and went to asking if they know where he done went. Of course, they all said no, and all of them put on their boots and breeches and went to searching for Hired. Right off, they figured, knowing him as they did, to look at that hole in the mountain. Curiosity